Hey, this is Master Cleveland of Classic Taekwondo. Want to do something a little bit different today. I'm always doing something different, but a few days ago I watched a video with a gentleman in Muay Thai shorts and shirt, and he basically, from time to time, goes out there and talks about arts he thinks won't work in a fight. And naturally, he came around to Taekwondo saying, it just doesn't work. I said, well, when you mention arts like Taekwondo, you have to look at it from a case by case situation. Not every instructor out there is going to teach the complete art. Most of them, many of them, they're going along with what South Korea was saying years ago, which was we're going to basically make this palatable as a sport where we're going to limit the number of techniques that you can use in competition because we don't want people getting injured. We don't want it to look boring. And I apologize if I've offended any instructors out there who are doing this, but I'm basically just going to put it out there the way it is, the way I see it anyway. One thing that I find particularly jarring about that whole video is the fact that you got a person who may or may not have trained in the art with an instructor that was willing to spend the time going over things in their entirety. Taekwondo, like a lot of other arts, I see as there are elements. You have your basics. You have your forms, your kata, your hyungs, your toes, whatever they're called. And then you have self-defense. You have sparring, which runs the gamut. It mostly sport, but there are other things to be learned from it. And then there's breaking, which again, it's mere showmanship, or you're showing the level of force that could be generated through an object, which of course, when you're looking at it from a combat perspective, how much force is generated through a body, which also goes back to an earlier video where I mentioned something about trembling shock. Trembling shock is just basically force that is generated through a body that is balanced, a spine and whatnot that's aligned, weight that's distributed in the direction the force is going, and speed. One of these is lacking, you don't have power, which is that's what those ingredients add up to, power. But getting back on track, when you have a person that's going to sit there and say something's not effective, you have to look at it from the perspective of, okay, there are a lot of instructors out there that just simply teach what works in competition, which kind of limits what you can call effective in any way. I mean, it's effective in a sports arena. But then again, if we look at MMA, it's the same thing. It's a little bit more free. However, there's still a referee, so there's still rules. A street fight is entirely different. Things are decided in seconds. Things don't go on for minutes. If things are going on for minutes in a street fight, I don't care what you train in, you don't know what you're doing. Because unless you have 15 people coming after you, and I'd recommend in that situation you run, you're not really looking at this from any kind of common sense perspective, because Taekwondo is a very effective art if it's taught in its entirety and an instructor takes the time out to explain the technique, explain what makes any technique effective. Yes, you do sparring to see things like footwork and timing and things like that, but at the same time, if you're looking at it from an Olympic competitor's perspective, most of the time they're not even using their hands. They're doing a lot of kicks that some of them, I look at them and to this day, I can honestly say, I gotta say, all right, that's cute, but I'm not sure I would teach that as a core technique for the art. But again, if your emphasis is on sport, maybe that's going to float your boat. But for someone who's going to call an art ineffective, first off, you have to see some instructors, or go and see some instructors who are taking it seriously, who aren't just looking at it for one thing. If you're only looking at it for competition, yes, you're going to have a lens that you see it in. It's like, okay, I can't use hands, so they're going to assume Taekwondo doesn't have any hands. We're going to use these high, flashy kicks, which they're going to assume that's the entire arsenal, which I can tell you from 3 decades of training. It's not. There are low kicks. There are all kinds of hand techniques, that most of which you can't use in an Olympic forum. Now, in some open tournaments, you can use more, but still there are ones that, understandably, you can't use. Trips, takedowns, sweeps, those are part of Taekwondo. Taekwondo gains its it owes its existence to karate. I mean, the Japanese occupied Korea for almost 4 decades. It was not a good time. But their arts were introduced into Korea, and a lot of instructors went to China. Some even went to Japan, and they learned karate or kung fu in China. And that made its way back into some of the modern Korean arts. But I digress. I'll get back to the point. When you're going to call something ineffective, first off, you have to stop looking at everything as a sport, as a competition. A competition, there are rules and there's a prize. In a street fight, the prize is you live. You go home with all 10 fingers, all 10 toes, all the teeth in your mouth, and you're able to walk upright, unassisted. To say something isn't effective is to fail to understand that you're not learning, unless your goal in life is just to go learn and go out and get in fights, in which case one day you're going to run into that guy who's going to smoke you because you just have to make one mistake. I mean, I'm being a little bit raw with this video because honestly, I find it kind of insulting for someone to sit there and say something doesn't work when you're going to compare it to things that are, again, themselves combat sports. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, as effective as it is, it's still more or less a sport. When you look at Judo versus Jiu-Jitsu, you get 2 different things. And Judo focuses on destroying one's balance so you can throw. Jiu-Jitsu takes it from a slightly different lens, which is destroy the joint, so that when you throw them on the ground, the fight's really over. Jiu-Jitsu, as in Japan back then, was you lived, and your opponent sometimes died. Judo, it was more, they took a lot of those techniques that were deemed a little bit too much and made it more friendly to where people could practice it. And ultimately, in 1960, 64, it got into the Olympics. A lot of arts die when they go to the Olympics because you're only seeing a very small part of that art. I'm not saying judo is not effective. It is. Jiu-Jitsu and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they're effective. But like everything else, it's down to who practices. It's down to who's training and what their emphasis is. If you're going to say all arts are ineffective, an art's ineffective just because of what you saw 1 or 2 people do, that's very limited. What I can say about what I teach is, yes, I've taught people who could have gone to competitions, but the thing is, the goal was not that. The goal was, at the same time, on the back end, they were learning how to use a technique to end a fight, if they got in one. And the truth of the matter is, if you're training in the martial arts just to go get in fights, you're a fool. Because eventually, you will find that one person who's either going to humble you or they're going to take you out of this life. It's just not worth it. I mean, he has a right to his opinion, and that's fine. But if you're going to make statements like that, understand that a fight and what you do in the competition, they're totally different things. There's elements that you don't see. There's different people showing up. I mean, you may not be fighting just one guy. You're dealing with one guy, and all of a sudden 2 or 3 others show up, and maybe they're not unarmed. It's a perspective. It's a mindset. You can call an art really super effective, and that may be true in arena. If you're dealing with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu versus karate, and the karate guy decides to fight the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy's fight, he's going to probably lose. Vice versa. If he tries to fight the karate guy's fight, he's going to have problems. But again, a street fight, as he put it, that's a foolish statement, because in a street fight, there are no rules. And a practitioner that, of any art that's out there who gets attacked, they're going to use what works. They're not going to waste their time worrying about, oh, this is a Taekwondo kick or this is a judo throw. They're going to use what works. Okay, rant over. But I just feel that if people are going to go out there and insult arts, you have to understand that art. I mean, kata forms by themselves, there's endless numbers of things that are going on. There's joint locks, there's throws, there's takedowns, there's bone breaking. But people don't pay attention because it's not exciting looking. And maybe they didn't, if they did attend a school, maybe they didn't get that far, or the instructor just wasn't into explaining beyond the basic what a form is. A kata, a kyung, tull, whatever it's called, style by style. If they're not paying attention, they're not going to see it. And if the instructor's not teaching it, they're not going to get it. But I just feel that anybody who's out there training know why. But if you're going out there with the misconception of thinking that any art is going to be street fight proof, I got the Brooklyn Bridge to sell you, because it's down to who trains. And it's also down to, when we're talking about a situation, sometimes you got to walk away. And if you can't, then you do what is necessary to make sure you can walk away. That's all I got. If you like what you hear, you have any questions, comments, and I know some people will have stuff to say, by all means do so. If you like the content, though, please send me a like, subscribe. More to come.